Wait, we're not ready yet. I'm here. No, not here.
This is where the story starts.
Inside of every book,
There's a tiny little world. Come on, let's take a look. We're quite little. We have backs and front.
And middles,
We make stories.
words and letters.
We build books. There's nothing better. I'm Rocco. I'm the foreman, and I just love to read.
I'm Ollie. I like pictures. They're what every story needs.
I'm Kama. I like letters, because they turn into words.
Come on now.
Let's sing this song.
That you've already heard.
We're the middle. We're quite little. We have backs and fronts and middles. We love stories. These creations are made with imagination. All right, everybody, let's build a book. Okay, let's see what book we're building for you today. It's Brenda and Edward, written and illustrated by Mary Ann Kowalski.
Oh, hi! Welcome to the Word Room. We're busy building a great book with lots of great words. Here are two of my favorite ones. Say them with me. Dog. D-O-G. Dog. Sad. S-A-D. Sad. Remember to listen closely for today's words.
Okay, comma, the words look good. Molly, what pictures are you painting today?
let's see. There are dogs and a subway, and near the end, we're working really hard on a picture of a beautiful country house. Keep your eyes open. There's lots of great pictures to come.
Everything seems to be humming along. Looks like this book is ready to go. Stand by. Let's turn the page. Brenda and Edward.
Brenda and Edward were two happy dogs. They lived behind a French restaurant in a large cardboard box, which they had made very cozy. In winter, they would sit by the fire, and Edward would read aloud.
Isn't that great? Dogs who like to read. Brenda and Edward sound just like you and me. See ya.
In summer, they would sit on Mrs. Levitt's steps and watch people. Edward worked as a night watchdog in a garage on the other side of town. He left for work every afternoon at 4 o'clock. One day, Edward was late, so he left in a hurry and forgot his dinner. Brenda ran after him, calling his name, but the street was noisy and he could not hear her. She thought she saw him going down the subway stairs. Pushing her way through the crowd, she ran down the steps, under the turnstile, and onto the train. The doors slammed shut, the train jerked, and Brenda could hardly stand up. Her heart pounded so loudly she couldn't hear all the people laughing at her. "A dog on the subway," a lady laughed. "Did you pay your fare?"
That is pretty funny. A dog riding on the subway. Hey, dog. That's one of today's words. I almost missed it. A dog on the subway.
It might seem funny at first, but look at Brenda. Look closely. She doesn't think it's funny. She looks scared.
The moment the train stopped, Brenda raced out the doors and ran up the stairs. "I'll just go home and wait for Edward," she said to herself. That thought made her feel much better. But when she reached the street, she did not know where she was. It was dark and nothing looked familiar.
Familiar. Familiar. Hey, that's a new word. It means that Brenda had never seen this place before. It wasn't familiar.
Familiar. That's kind of nice. Familiar.
Rocco, I'm glad you like the word and all, but the story.
Oh, yes, the story. Sometimes the Biddle can get a little carried away. Now, where was I? Oh, yes.
Brenda thought she saw Edward going into a drugstore across the street. She ran to him without looking left or right.
Oh boy, this is a scary picture. See how dark it is? Brenda should have looked before she crossed the street. I hope she's all right.
A car screeched. Brenda saw the lights and heard a thud. She rolled over and over. Then she lay very still and looked up at all the faces bent over her. "The dog's just had a nasty fright," said a man. "It's only a filthy stray," said another. "Take her to the pound and let them take care of her."
I don't know if I like this story, Rocco.
Why? What's wrong?
What do you mean, what's wrong? Brenda just got hit by a car. That's pretty sad.
Come, sometimes sad stories have the happiest endings.
You mean everything will turn out okay for Brenda and Edward? Oh, I sure hope so.
Now, just listen. Let's see. But the lady who drove the car stroked Brenda's head and spoke softly to her.
Oh, that's nice.
Two men lifted Brenda into the back of the car. The door slammed shut and the car disappeared into the night. The next morning, Edward returned from work to find an empty house. That's strange, he muttered. He was hungry, but he settled into his chair to read the paper and wait for Brenda. He waited and waited. After a while, Edward became a little worried. "I'm sure something has happened to her," he said very softly. He crawled onto his bed to think. He wasn't hungry anymore. Finally, Edward decided to get up and search for Brenda. He sniffed everywhere in the neighborhood. He even went to other neighborhoods far away. He sniffed and he sniffed, but he never found her.
Hey, that's not happier. You said that this story was going to get happier. It's sadder than it was before.
We'll only find out if I keep reading. But I need you to get back to work and build the words for the end of the story.
No way. This story's too sad.
Oh, come on. Where's your Biddle spirit?
What do you mean?
Well, I mean that a Biddle always sees a story through to the end. Happy or sad. What about you? Do you want me to keep reading?
You do? Even though it's sad? Boy, you must be part Biddle.
Hey, what happened to the words? We can't have a story without words. And there's still lots of great pictures to come, too.
All right, Rocco. I'll go back to building the words. But you have to promise that this story gets happier.
Now there's the Biddle spirit. The story must go on. Now get back to work!
Many years passed, and Edward became an old dog. The man at the garage began to talk of replacing him with a younger dog. This made Edward sad, but the saddest thing in his whole life had already happened when he lost Brenda, so he only sighed. On the morning of his last day at work, he was gathering his things. Suddenly, he heard a lady shouting at the owner of the garage. "You call this fixed? I should call the police." Edward looked up at the angriest customer he had ever seen.
Hey, I remember her. That looks like the same lady who drove the car. You know, the one that hit Brenda.
I think Lolly's right. What do you think will happen? Will Edward find out who she is? Will she find out that Edward knows Brenda? Will he?
Will I ever get to read the end of the story? That's the only way you're going to find out.
Sorry, Rocco. Go ahead. I think I feel that happy ending you promised. Is it coming, Rocco? Is it?
Let's see. Where were we?
As the lady got ready to leave, Edward walked up to the car and sniffed the tires, just out of habit. When she opened the door, Edward stopped. A smell came from the car that could belong to only one dog, Brenda. Edward jumped into the car, and nothing anyone tried could make him leave. Finally, the lady decided to take Edward home with her. They drove for a long, long time. They drove all the way to the country. As the sun was setting, they reached the grandest house Edward had ever seen. And there on the front porch was Brenda. A little older, of course, but still a handsome dog. After a touching reunion, Brenda and Edward had dinner and watched the moon rise over the hills. And after that, they lived happily ever after, two happy dogs once more.
The end.
Yay! I'm sure glad I went back to building the words.
Me too. Otherwise, we would never have had such a happily ever after story. There's nothing better than that.
Yep, looks like we've got another book here, all ready for building, but, nah, you're probably too tired.
We're not too tired. We'll build it.
Give us a book to build. Any book.
Yeah, Bittles build books best.
Here we go, one book straight through. Today's story is The Emperor Penguin's New Clothes, written and illustrated by Janet Perlman.
Here are two words to listen for. This is the word cloth. C-L-O-T-H. That's what clothes are made from. Cloth. You'll see just how important that word is. Oh boy, that's a big word. It's parade. Parade. I think you know what a parade is. That's like a big party where everyone lines the streets to see people march past. Parade. Listen for it.
Rocco! Hey, Rocco!
Oh, yes, Lolly.
I have a picture of the parade. Look at all the penguins marching past and all the people lining the street. Isn't it the most wonderful thing?
Rocco! Rocco!
Oh, what is it, Coma?
What about the other word?
Oh, you mean cloth.
Yeah, cloth is an even more important word than parade. Where's the picture of cloth?
It says, that's interesting. It says here that you can't see the cloth.
Can't see it? Rocco, how am I gonna paint something you can't even see?
Have paint for picture.
Not now, Grump. I've got a real problem. I've got to figure out how to paint something you can't even see.
Oh, Grump can help. Here.
Grump, that's an empty can. There's nothing there. How can this help?
Oh, can not empty. Just look empty.
You mean invisible paint? Oh, that's how I'll paint the cloth you can't see. Oh, thanks, Grump.
Oh, invisible paint. That's funny. Stand by. Let's turn the page. The Emperor Penguin's New Clothes.
There was once an emperor penguin who was so fond of fine clothes that he spent nearly all his money on them. He had a different outfit for every hour of the day, and if he didn't have anything new to wear, he was soon filled with boredom. "It is the clothes that make the penguin," he would often say. He had no time for his soldiers or his royal subjects. If anyone asked where the emperor was, the answer was nearly always, "He is in his dressing room." One day, two scoundrels came to town.
Did you hear that? Scoundrel. That's a funny sounding word. A scoundrel is somebody who's up to no good. Boy, those penguins sure look like scoundrels.
One day, two scoundrels came to town. They announced they were master weavers who could make a special magic cloth. Not only was it unusually beautiful, but it was completely invisible to those who were either dishonest or simple-minded. Now that was a rare thing indeed. All the penguins were very impressed, although none could afford the high prices the weavers were asking. When news of the magic cloth reached the Emperor Penguin, he thought, "That's the thing for me. With a suit made of this cloth, I will be able to tell who in my court can be trusted and who are the foolish ones. I must order some of this cloth at once."
I can't wait any longer. Did you hear it? One of today's special words. You did hear it. Cloth. That's what clothes are made from. You'll hear it a lot more, too. C-L-O-T-H. Cloth.
So the Emperor commanded the weavers to make some of their special cloth for him. Large amounts of gold were paid to them, and they were given the finest silk thread with which to weave the cloth. The scoundrels set up 2 huge weaving looms, but they kept the silk for themselves. They sat at the looms day and night, pretending to be very busy, though there was no thread on the machines at all. After a time, the Emperor wondered how his cloth was coming along, so he sent 3 trusted high officials to inspect it for him. The weavers greeted them with much excitement. "See for yourselves," they exclaimed. "The Emperor's cloth is the most beautiful we have ever woven."
Are you watching? Look at this picture. Can you see any cloth? I wonder what the high officials are going to say. Let's listen.
But when the high officials looked at the looms, their beaks dropped. They could see nothing, nothing at all. The weavers pointed out fine details, the pattern here, the colors there. The high officials put on their spectacles, but they could not see a single thread. Is it possible that I am dishonest or a simpleton? Each one thought to himself. Perhaps I am not fit to be a high official. The Emperor must never find out. So one of them said, "Marvelous! Such brilliant colors." And the others quickly added, "Yes, simply exquisite, glorious. We will tell the Emperor how wonderful his cloth will be." The Emperor was delighted to hear the good news and sent the weavers more gold and silk to finish their work. Again, they kept the silk for themselves and did no weaving at all.
Those scoundrels are stealing from the Emperor. I wonder what the Emperor will say when he finds out. I'll bet they'll get in trouble.
Time passed, and the Emperor grew impatient to see his cloth, so he decided to visit the weavers himself. He took with him his wisest advisors, including the 3 high officials who had been there before. When the Emperor arrived at the shop, the weavers bowed low and invited everyone to inspect the looms. "Isn't this the most magnificent cloth you have ever seen?" they said proudly. "Oh, yes," exclaimed the high officials, and one added, "Why, the colors are even more vivid than I remembered." Everyone else was speechless. They looked at the looms from every side and underneath as well, but no one could see even the tiniest bit of cloth.
Here it is! The Emperor is finally going to catch those scoundrels when he sees they don't have any cloth. Let's listen.
The Emperor rubbed his eyes in disbelief. "Good heavens," he thought. "If the others can see the cloth, why can't I? Am I dishonest or simple-minded? This is terrible. No one must find out." So he said, "Why, the cloth is splendid. What fine workmanship. Superb." And the others added their praise. "Indeed, how striking the pattern is. Delightful." The Emperor immediately ordered that a suit and a long trailing cape be made from the cloth. I will wear my new clothes in the grand parade for all to see, he exclaimed. A brilliant idea, said the weavers, and they measured him for the suit right then and there.
Rocco, wait!
What is it, Lolly? Shouldn't you be finishing the rest of the pictures?
I am.
Slow down, Lolly. What's wrong?
Well, I was working on the pictures with my invisible paint for the end of the story, and you'll never believe what happens when you put on invisible clothes. The Emperor...
Hold it! Oh, you're going to spoil the end of the story for everyone.
But...
No. Do you want to know what happens?
Hey, Lolly, what's going on? I was working on the words for the rest of the story when all of a sudden it stopped.
Well, I was painting the pictures when I got to the one where the Emperor finally tries on his new suit of clothes.
Wait, Lolly.
But you don't understand.
Sure I do. The scoundrels aren't really making cloth.
Uh-huh.
And you're using invisible paint.
Uh-huh.
So the suit isn't really there.
If you two are finished, can I please read the end of the story?
Sure, Rocco. Let's get back to building the book.
Yeah, we can't wait to see
The Emperor's new clothes.
Do you know what's so funny? Okay, where was I? Yes.
Soon every penguin in the land was talking about the grand parade. In the days that followed, the weavers could be seen busily cutting the air with their scissors, sewing with empty needles, and pretending to sew on buttons and trim. The night before the parade, they burned extra candles so passers-by would be sure to see how hard they were working. In the morning, the weavers hurried to the palace and announced, "The Emperor's new clothes are ready." "See, here is the jacket," said one, pretending to hold up the garment. "And here is the cape," said the other. "Oh dear, I cannot see the clothes," thought the Emperor. "But everyone else can, so they must be there." The weavers helped him into the suit, piece by piece. "A perfect fit," said one. "A most flattering color," said the other. "Indeed," said the Emperor, "these clothes are as light as a feather. Is there a draft in here?" The penguins of the court were full of praise for the Emperor's new clothes. "The very height of fashion," they raved. "Sensational! Sheer perfection!"
I can't wait! Here's that picture of the parade. Look really closely. There's so much going on. My favorite is the penguin walking on his hands. Can you see him? Over here. Here he is. Silly penguin.
Trumpets sounded, and the grand parade was underway. Everywhere, penguins crowded the streets, waiting to see the Emperor's new clothes. What a magnificent, stately procession it was. First came soldiers and marching bands in splendid uniforms, followed by dancers and acrobats in colorful costumes. Then came the official penguins of the court in long flowing robes, and at last, the Emperor. He walked proudly, his beak held high, his royal train bearers pretending to carry the long cape. A hush fell over the crowd as he approached. Everyone stared in amazement. No one could see the Emperor's clothes at all. But then a few penguins started to cheer, and others joined in. No one wanted to be thought dishonest or simple-minded. "Look at the Emperor's new clothes! How majestic he is!" came the cries of admiration from every side. Everybody waved at the Emperor, and the Emperor waved back. Suddenly, a small voice rose from the crowd. "But look! The Emperor isn't wearing any clothes. The voice came from a very young penguin. Some of the crowd stopped cheering as the penguin called out louder, "Can't you see? The Emperor isn't wearing any clothes at all." Now the Emperor heard him too. He was shocked to hear such a thing. But soon others were repeating what the young penguin had said, first in whispers, and then louder, until the whole crowd was shouting, "He's right! The Emperor has no clothes!" The Emperor's beak turned bright red, for he knew it must be true. Now he could only march proudly on, his royal train bearers behind him, carrying nothing at all. As for the scoundrels, they were never seen in the town again.
The end. That story was so funny. The pictures were great.
Oh, I couldn't have done it without my invisible paint.
Lolly, you think it's funny that the Emperor had no clothes? That he got fooled by the scoundrels?
Well, sure, Rocco. I mean, how simple-minded can you be?
Lolly, what if I told you that there is no such thing as invisible paint?
Sure there is, Rocco. I have the paint right here. Grump gave it to me. Hey, wait a minute. Empty? Where are you? You are in so much trouble. Where are you?
Grumpful Lolly good. Grump such a scoundrel. Well, it's quit time. But never forget.
Bittles, build books best.
Bye! Bye-bye.